Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about the Tao Te Ching. For 2,000 years, interpretations of the Tao Te Ching have varied among Chinese scholars. Yet there is still no definitive conclusion on what it actually conveys. Interpretations are subjective. So, how should we understand the Tao Te Ching? Since this series starts with Kabbalah, what is the connection between the Tao Te Ching and Kabbalah? Today, we'll approach this topic differently by revealing the true nature of the Tao Te Ching through symbolism and geometry. The Tao Te Ching is said to be written by Laozi, the librarian of the Zhou Dynasty's National Library. During Laozi's time in the pre-Qing period, Eastern philosophy saw the rise of various schools of thought, while the West saw figures like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. This era, known as the Axial Age, marked a significant breakthrough in human civilization. From my perspective, the sages of the Axial Age represent only the observable surface, with an invisible and immense rule underlying them. What exactly is this invisible supreme rule? The Tao Te Ching provides an explanation. In chapter 25 of the Tao Te Ching, it says that there is an entity that existed before heaven and earth, quiet and vast, independent and unchanging, circulating endlessly without end, and it can be considered the mother of all things. This means that Tao is an inherent existence that predates heaven and earth. It is silent and vast, existing independently without change, and continuously operating without depletion, becoming the source of all things. Laozi could not find a name for it, so he used the word Tao to express it. If forced to name it, it would be great. In the Great Tao is simple. Great Tao refers to this concept where Tao is the word, and great is the name. Ancient Chinese summarized the most profound rules as great images, which are hexagrams. In the Xia dynasty, there were 8 primary hexagrams, which evolved into 64 hexagrams in the Zhou dynasty. Whether 8 or 64 hexagrams, they are independent and unchanging, circulating endlessly as described in the Tao Te Ching. Mr. Fu Pyram also mentioned that to study the Tao Te Ching, one must start with chapter 25, as it reflects the core of Tao. Why was it difficult for people in the past to describe this? Mr. Fu Pyram believes it's because people are within it and cannot see the full picture, just as one inside a mountain cannot see the whole mountain. Given this, did Laozi explain the basic structure of Tao? Yes. Chapter 4.2.12 the Tao Te Ching mentions, Tao produces 1. 1 produces 2. 2 produces 3. And 3 produces all things. I subjectively and irresponsibly believe that Laozi has provided a clear explanation of the structure of Tao. To understand the structure of Tao, we might look to ancient Greece from the Axial Age for reference. Gold, silver, copper, iron, and elements like carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, and hydrogen come from the periodic table published by Russian chemist Dmitry Mendeleev in 1816. Since the periodic table's emergence, classical elements have become less prominent. For a long time, the 118 elements in the periodic table were considered the fundamental building blocks of the material world. The periodic table actually describes the basic atoms of 118 substances, and the word atom comes from ancient Greek, meaning indivisible. So, are these atoms truly indivisible? In 1955, a similar question was posed to Qian Sengquang. Qian Sengquang answered that atoms are the smallest indivisible matter. However, most people philosophically believe that matter can be infinitely divided. He cited Zhuangzi's idea from the World chapter. A foot-long pestle. Have it daily. Never exhausted. Questioning the indivisibility of atoms. Years later, science proved that atoms can be divided further into protons, electrons, neutrons, and then quarks and gluons. Clearly, these predictions were accurate. If we base material on the elements in the periodic table, the world seems contradictory. For example, methane and benzene are both composed of carbon and hydrogen. But methane has a tetrahedral structure, while benzene has a hexagonal structure, indicating they are not the same substance despite having the same basic elements. Additionally, graphite and diamond, though composed of the same element, are entirely different substances. With 8 billion people in the world, we are all the same at the elemental level. But each person is uniquely different, possibly due to minor differences in element arrangement. Thus, if the foundation of matter is atoms, why are identical atoms considered different substances? We can understand that the key to matter is not in the elements themselves, but in the arrangement of atoms. Many might point out that the structure mentioned is at the molecular level. Does it also apply to the proton level? Robert James Moon, a nuclear physicist from the Manhattan Project, proposed a proton arrangement theory, suggesting protons are at the vertices of Platonic solids. For example, the 8 protons in an oxygen nucleus occupy the vertices of a regular hexaderon, which is a stable core. In this model, the internal proton arrangements of various elements atoms are limited to 5 types: tetrahedron, hexaderon, octahedron, dodecahedron, and icosahedron. Indeed, these 5 regular polyhedra are the only 5 in the world, also known as Platonic solids. The reason there are only these 5 has been explained by Professor Lee Youngel, so we won't delve into it here. Subsequently, Lawrence Herschel's 2005 paper, based on Moon's proton model, further explained the neutron arrangement model, and used these 5 structures to explain the periodic table. Thus, modern physics suggests that no matter how large or small the world is, fundamental particles are just vortices in the field, and the field itself is the more fundamental existence. Particle physics introduces the process of understanding the world, including existence, mass, interaction forces, energy, and particle fields. At this point, you should recognize a basic structure I often mention: the Platonic solids. So, what exactly are Platonic solids, and what is their connection to the East? As everyone knows, classical Western theory identifies 4 fundamental elements: and fire, water, and air. The concept of these elements was first proposed by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato in his work Timaeus around 360 BC, which is considered one of the earliest chemical texts in history. Plato hypothesized that matter is composed of some fundamental and unique geometric structures. The tetrahedron represents fire, the octahedron represents air, the icosahedron represents water, and the cube represents earth. He also mentioned a 5th solid, the dodecahedron, in Phaedo, which he referred to as the 5th element. Later, Plato's student Aristotle formally named this 5th element ether. In ancient India, there were similar concepts for elements, such as the 4 great elements mentioned in Buddhism and Hinduism, which actually refer to the classical 4 elements. Later, during the Renaissance, Kepler established a tradition of mathematical correspondences, associating the 5 regular polyhedra with the 5 planets: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Thus, Western 5-element theory was eventually aligned with Eastern theory of the 5 elements. So, how did Plato know there were only 5 regular polyhedra? This is thanks to the advanced geometry of ancient Greece. The construction methods of the regular polyhedra are recorded in Euclid's Elements, Book XIII. Thus, Plato's idea of the Platonic solids was not accidental. As for how Plato connected these 5 regular polyhedra with the 5 elements, it remains unknown. Perhaps it was some form of divine insight. According to elements, ancient people used only 2 tools to draw the Platonic solids: a compass and a straightedge. Did these tools really exist back then? The earliest mention of the compass can be traced to the records of the Grand Historian, which describes Daya's use of a straightedge and compass for flood control. The terms straightedge and compass also appear in oracle bone inscriptions from the 15th century BC. In the rites of Zu, it is recorded that craftsmen would use the sunrise, sunset, and the pole star to correct day and night during errors. This indicates that the Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties had both the compass and the straightedge. Given that ancient Greece had advanced geometry, it is not surprising that these tools were also available there. So, what can the Platonic solids be used for? There is a group of people dedicated to exploring the truths of the universe, known in the West as alchemists. Alchemy is often misunderstood as a mystical practice of turning base metals into gold. But in reality, many great scientists were also alchemists. For example, Pythagoras, Galileo, Leonardo da Vinci, and Newton all had some degree of alchemical capability. Though this is often underestimated, alchemy is generally divided into 3 levels. The first level involves the transformation of material elements, dealing with the conversion between inorganic substances, similar to phase changes in physical chemistry. The second level involves transformations between organisms, creating new artificial species, which falls under biomedicine. The third level concerns immortality, where immortality refers to eternal spirit and indestructible will. In simple terms, the 4 or 5 elements represented by the Platonic solids are the foundation of transformation in the eyes of alchemists. Don't think that the 5th element, ether, only existed in ancient Western thought until 100 years ago. It remained one of the unresolved problems in physics. Ultimately, Einstein removed ether through the principles of the constancy of the speed of light and Occam's razor. Ether was neither proven nor disproven, but was considered an unnecessary entity and thus discarded. This removal is related to the progress in the understanding of physics. Today, physics has advanced from understanding basic particles to understanding fields. Now, the most complex question arises: what about the structure of the Tao? How does the structure of the Tao relate to the Platonic solids? Laozi describes the Tao as there is something nebulous and indistinct, existing before heaven and earth, standing alone and unchanging, moving around endlessly, and without danger. If there is a highest will in the world, I will tentatively call it Tao. It neither arises from nothing nor from something, but from chaos. We are beings in chaos, functioning endlessly and without danger. Once this principle is established, it remains unchanged. With the first circle, we use a compass to find a point on the circle. Draw a line intersecting the circle, then place the compass at this intersection. Then draw another line intersecting the circle. Repeat these steps until 6 points are drawn. Now, the circumference is divided into 6 equal parts by these intersection points. Next, using these points as centers and the compass radius, draw circles, resulting in 7 circles. Combining this with the Tao Te Ching's chapter 4 Tutwa. The Tao gives birth to 1, 1 gives birth to 2, 2 gives birth to 3, and 3 gives birth to all things. We proceed to contraction. This phrase clearly involves 4 steps, which we break down one by one. First, the birth of the Tao. The first circle emerges from the Tao in chaos. The radius of this circle, and its relationship to chaos, is determined by the Tao. Second, 1 gives birth to 2, meaning the second circle is born from the first circle. Its radius is the same as the first, but its position is not yet fixed. Third, 2 gives birth to 3, meaning the third circle is born from the second circle. Its radius is the same as the previous 2. The second circle is fixed, so the third circle can only be placed to the left or right of the second circle. No other position is possible. Fourth, 3 gives birth to all things. So the previous 3 steps. The subsequent steps are repetitive. The first step determines existence and size. The second determines position. The third determines direction. And the fourth step, extending to infinity, is merely repetition and development. Due to space, we will end here for today. In the next session, we will continue discussing the Tao.